Hello everyone and welcome back to the Gleemen. Vance here today, joined with Matt, our resident first-time reader, who is now on Fires of Heaven.
I have some questions, or specifically one question will probably turn into multiple others.
Of course.
At the end of the Shadow Rising, Asmodean gets shielded by Lanfear. But we also know that Lanfear was like Kaylee or something like that.
The peddler lady.
The peddler lady who was with Kadir. And we know that Asmodean was also Jason Natail. And he reveals himself. He drops his disguise or whatever.
Right.
Or maybe not drops his disguise, but he declares himself from Jason Natail to Asmodean.
Right.
But then Lanfear appears out of nowhere, and shields him. So, what happens to Kaylee or Kylie in the Fires of Heaven? Because I'm up to like chapter 20.
Okay. Gotcha.
And
well, so you're saying it's pretty suspicious that with that much page time into a book, you haven't run back into her.
Yeah, like saying. Even just a mention, because she was mentioned quite often.
Yeah, in the Shadow Rising. Yeah,
Shadow Rising.
I think what we've run into is that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence in this case. Hey everyone, so quick update on this. Matt actually contacted me today, and he said he did find an answer to his question within the text of the books. And he specifically said, at the beginning of chapter 29 in the Fires of Heaven, they finally talk about Kylie disappearing, so she did disappear and no one really cared. He was kind of hoping he was right, but expecting somebody to actually care. So I think this points out a minor flaw within the Wheel of Time, in that a character who was relatively prominent as a side character in the Shadow Rising is barely talked about after that book. In the following one. So yeah, anyway, just wanted to let you all know that the next little section of our video / podcast here is going to be mildly irrelevant, but if you want to listen to us ramble on about Wheel of Time and the possibility of, where this character is at, feel free. If not, you can just scrub through the episode until you get to a point where we're not talking about it. Thanks everyone. So the only person who knows that was Lanfear, I think,
was Asmodean.
And I do not think he's told that to Rand, because Lanfear shielded him, and his only way of getting the shield undone currently is for Lanfear to undo it. So he doesn't want to piss her off necessarily. So she's probably still around, is what I'm thinking here, and
so just still around Kadir.
Yeah, just in the background, hiding out, not really doing anything except keeping an eye on Rand and Asmodean, and then she's leaving and doing other Forsaken things as she needs to.
Since she can skim as needed.
Right, yeah, she can do anything she needs to. So
okay.
I'm trying to think of anything else, but I think that's the correct answer. I believe she's still just around. You haven't seen her because she hasn't had anything active to do. So
it just seems like I feel like a plump, very smooth-skinned woman disappearing from the small amount of peddlers would not go unnoticed. So
that's fair. Yeah. I do believe she's still hanging around.
Okay.
She's just not doing very much right where you're at. So
okay.
Do you have any other questions or things that have been bothering you?
I'm trying to think.
Possible plot
I'm
holes?
sure there are quite a few, but it's hard to think about them in like all the books are kind of starting to merge together at this point.
That does happen.
That's kind of the problem with long-lived series is it's hard to remember what's in what book. But
exactly. I mean, it's a little bit
what
more
comes before what
in Wheel of Time up through book 6, honestly, because the books all have very distinct openings and closings. But from like book 7 onwards, I thought the endings and the beginnings kind of just melded into each other. It was less like, it was more like the end of a season of television than the end of a movie, which is what I compare the first 6 books to. The first 6 books are kind of like movies, and then books 7 through 14 are like the movies were adapted into it or transferred to a television show, and we're finishing out there. So it's more of a seasonal model. As far as that concerns, where it's the same overarching narrative, just the plot is less contained to each specific season and will sometimes stretch. It does start to blur. I can't remember what happens in a lot of books. Obviously, I'm more up on like the events of like what happens in the Eye of the World and the Great Hunt and a little bit of the Dragon Reborn, since I've started rereading it. Yeah. But in terms of like, I mean, I know what happens in Shadow Rising just because that book is so. Yeah. But Fires of Heaven, it starts to get a little bit blurry. Lord of Chaos gets pretty blurry. I mean, Lord of Chaos and Crown of Swords, there's a lot of stuff in there that I think blurs together, and it's even worse from like Path of Daggers onward. So. I mean, in terms of being able to tell the books apart, not that they're bad books, just in the events start to blend together. Gotcha. You're really just sort of like, oh yeah, I remember the ending of said book, and that's it.
Let me think. I guess
without getting into spoilers on all this stuff.
Yeah, I guess one other thing. Let me think. The basically, I guess, the coup d'etat, if you will, in the White Tower, I felt like that was too fast, if that makes sense.
Oh, the so two rivers. You're talking about how Elaida deposed Swan.
Yes.
In Shadow Rising.
So when you compare that extremely major event to the Two Rivers, with the battle in Two Rivers against all of the Trollocs and whatnot, trying to take over, there's a big difference in time devotion between those two.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is we're not really meant to see. We're not meant to see the actual deposition, right?
Yeah.
Like,
is just kind of like a. You actually have, I think there's an actual literal blackout scene where in the chapter, within the actual chapter, Swan,
like SWAN,
Swan, yep, Shantae is like, what are you doing in here? You can't be in here. I didn't summon you. And then she blacks out, and she wakes up in a dungeon, and she's stilled, and it's like, what happened in between? Right. I mean, you get a little bit of things added with Gawain and Galad ending up killing Schwann's warder and this other guy, I guess the warder who's in charge of teaching all the junior
the guy warders, who chastised Gawain and Galad in the Dragon Reborn
for losing to someone with a stick.
Well, not that he was chastising them for losing. He was chastising them for being overconfident, for thinking they could take somebody on without knowing better.
Yeah, that's actually, I think we talked about this in a previous video.
We did.
The audiobooks are not very good. At least they're not. It's not that they're not very good. The version you gave me is not very good. I know.
Did you go fill it in with any of the?
I read the wiki.
Okay.
That's really about all I did.
Oh well, the audiobooks are on various online platforms.
Yes.
Available for free. Just to go fill in the holes from my borrowed, damaged MP3s I ripped like years and years and years ago. So,
but so we get a little bit of filling in the blanks from that, but it's still Like I was just expecting a little bit more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit more filling in of the blanks. Like we don't ever see the blue Exodus really. And we don't see...
I'm trying to think where you're at. I don't think you're where I think you're at in the books right now.
So, I mean, we hear, like, in Fires of Heaven, and you may want to put, like, a spoiler banner or something.
Yeah, I'm just going to tell you right now, without getting too deep into spoilers, this is going to come back, okay?
Yeah.
Do not worry. Jordan does cover this event. So... to alleviate your fears, it's just right now in the books there's some more pressing events happening with our main characters, because what it is, we actually have quite a number of our main characters and our big side characters together, right? Because like
some of the side characters are just almost as important,
right? Well, you've got Perrin and Fael and Loyal in the Two Rivers with Gaul and Tam and everybody there, and then you've got Matt. He's with Rand, and you got Egwene, and she's with Rand. And so that's 3 main characters together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yes, you're getting a lot of focus on these events. Now, in Fires of Heaven, he actually pulls back from Perrin a little bit.
Yeah, I've noticed
because he spent a whole lot of time in both the Dragon Reborn and the Shadow Rising on Perrin.
Yeah.
I mean, Perrin was honestly, like... he was the main character of the Dragon Reborn, to be real, and then he was definitely co-main character in the Shadow Rising.
Yeah.
So,
like the only thing I've heard about Perrin so far is a little bit of an offshoot, and from like Gabriel hand waving off a rebellion in the Two Rivers.
Oh, Lord Gabriel over in Kingdom.
Yeah. And that's all I've gotten so far.
Yeah.
Which is a nice little bit of a throwback, or not a throwback, but a
reference,
a hint
to the stuff happening there.
Right.
So, anyway, Zoom's telling me meeting will end in 10 minutes. Anyway, like, so you've got all them, and then you've got Nynaeve and Elaine over in.
Oh yeah.
They're in Tanchico, correct?
Yep.
So, they're off over there, so the focus isn't around very much Aes Sedai stuff happening.
Oh yeah.
That's why you're not seeing that. I'm trying to think of anything else that kind of leads into.
I guess the reason why I want more of that is because we're given this fantasy magic school, and then 3 books in, it's like bye fantasy magic school.
Well, yeah, it's like here's one of the most,
and literally.
Well, here's one of the coolest implementations of magic school that's existed in a long time, and all of our main girls that go there are sent away from it, so they keep running away from school. It's like it's kind of like Harry Potter in that regard, where they're like in Hogwarts and they have to like leave Hogwarts in the later books. And stuff
but
like
at least
that.
you get like classroom scenes in Hogwarts, you don't even get that. I don't know.
Yeah,
you could do like a spin-off of like teaching in the White Tower or something. I don't know.
A spin-off, yeah.
Well,
I mean, so what you should do is you should talk with Nae'Blis sometimes, and get his
Adventures of White Tower.
Right. Well, I mean, Nae'Blis is one of these people who's like he'll say it all the time. Like, I wish they made more books. I mean, that's a direct quote from Nae'Blis. It's like, I wouldn't have cared if it was 20 books or 50, another 10.
I mean, you got this bright, big universe. And there's not like a lot of it's all focused around these main characters, and there's so many books based around these main characters. But there's probably enough lore material at this point where you could make it like how the D&D books are, Oh,
you talking about like Forgotten Realms type stuff?
Yeah.
Well, so
you may lose out on quality there, though.
Well, I am going to tell you that prior to Robert Jordan's diagnosis and then his later passing, he was fully intending to write 2 more prequel novels and some what he called the Outrigger novels, which were expansions on some characters that he wanted to continue the story with. And one of the most prominent characters he mentioned was he wanted to write one about Matt. And his further adventures after the conclusion of the series.
I'd like a story about Lan.
I think that was
before
definitely
him becoming a warder.
Oh well, there is a prequel novel, Matt.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe I should read that. When should I read that?
Actually, generally the most ideal time is considered right after Fires of Heaven, believe it or not. So if you want to,
maybe
instead of going
I'll start that next.
Yeah, it's a good Fires of Heaven is a good demarc. It's kind of like the end of the first arc of the Wheel of Time, if that makes sense. Right? Like if you were to really break down the series into arcs, like you could break it down into like trilogies. So like books 1 through 3 and then 4 through 6 comprise 2 arcs. That kind of makes sense given the story structure of 1 through 3. But I think the overall plot structure 1 through 5 makes more sense as like the first arc of the Wheel of Time. And then like 6 through 9 is the next arc. And then it's like 10 through the end, essentially.
Gotcha.
Would be kind of how I view the overall plot arcs. But if you're just talking like structure elements, then it's like 1 through 3 are these distinct, they are this way, they're like the traditional heroic fantasy, and then you got 4, 5, 6, which are all similar in structure, and then 7 through 10 change up that structure a little bit, and they have that kind of way, and then the last 3, which are the Sanderson books. Knife of Dreams and the Sanderson books, I should say. The last 4, actually, sorry. Also kind of change up the structure. Although I think Book 11 stands a little bit on its own. Some folks may disagree with that. But anywho, without going into the story contents, like structurally, in terms of the nuts and bolts of the stories, that's how I can break them up, if that makes sense.
I got you. I got you. There's just so much.
Yep. There's a lot. There is a lot.
That you could talk about.
Oh, tons. So, all right, I have one for you. So, what's your impression of Min? We haven't really talked about her, but she's something of a hot button issue in the community, and I really want to know your impression of this character.
She's like a walking prophecy book.
So she's a prop, is what you're saying?
Kind of. Like she's a prop who's in love with Rand.
Does she have agency? The answer is yes and no. She has some agency. So I mean, mostly like, so the running joke is that Min is a sexy lamp in the community.
Sexy lamp.
Right. Well, so there's a subset of the community that doesn't like this because it involves some measure of quote-unquote feminist critical theory applied to the media, and as we know, there are some elements of our fandom out there who don't want to apply any of that to this and just want to take the work as it is, and that's fine. But applying critical theory to any body of work does not inherently diminish it. In fact, applying theory can teach us things about the work and can teach us things about the author. No one is applying this theory to sit out there and say Jordan was terrible and he was malicious and we hate him. Everyone, I think, assumes Robert Jordan always had best of intentions whenever he does anything, even if he stumbles and gets stuff wrong. So
I think, and this is very early, like I don't know how much we can get into this since I'm only on book 5. Right. But to me, it seems like Robert wanted a way to add to the prophecies that weren't out, you know? Like they weren't written in books. He wanted to be able to
or maybe
add more mystery that you could wonder about.
Yeah. I think that's totally valid.
He made a character and he was like, well, I can't just have them be this mysterious prophet.
So he made them someone close that's actually...
It's like why would they hang out with this mysterious prophet? Well, let's make it an attractive woman that's attracted to the main character.
Yep. And
he only really had the mysterious prophet part of the character.
Gotcha. Who just happened to be a attractive woman.
Yeah.
In love with our main character.
I don't really know if that's really the best way to put it, but...
So, well, I mean, I'll just share with you my experience with the character on my current reread, where I'm at in Dragon Reborn. So no spoilers past Dragon Reborn for well, no spoilers past where you're at in Fires of Heaven for Min's story arc.
Yeah.
But where I remember most of her story right now is from this book. And on page 94 of the trade paperback, let me read this excerpt here. Why are we just sitting here? Min burst out. If Rand is going to Tyr, why are we following him? He can be killed! Or why are we sitting here? Now, this is an element that I didn't pick up on in my teens and 20s for Min's character. So yeah, I guess in my teens and early 20s, I found that more compelling than I did now that I'm in my early 30s. And I guess it was just that, kind of like, to have a girl fawning over me. And, now that I'm matured, it's like,
Yeah. She's a almost 30-year-old who acts like she's in her teens.
Yeah. I mean, it was... I didn't remember Min falling that hard for Rand that fast. Yeah. I remember her fighting against it a lot longer in the books. I remembered, and this is I'm going off of having read a lot of these early books almost 10 years ago, or even earlier, that I remembered at least her going through like book 6 and being like not accepting of this.
Yeah.
But here I am in book 3, and geez, she's already full blown head over heels for the dude, I guess. Yeah. And even at book 2, at the end of book 2, it was obvious as well. So I guess I didn't either notice that or was willfully ignorant.
Yeah.
Of it, and it's one element that since has been pointed out to me, I can't ignore it. And maybe that's why people don't like this argument, because they don't want to think about it. They just want to enjoy Min, because honestly, her introduction is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're introduced to her. Well, she's, worked all these different odd jobs.
Yeah.
And she's, she has a bit of spunk to her personality. And it's a little refreshing compared to the farm folks we've seen from Emmons Field in the Eye of the World when we meet her. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Barely 5 books in, and so there's another 9 books left. I can't imagine this is all there is to her character. There's got to be some character growth and development, other than being a walking, talking prophecy generator. I hope.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it just comes from the fact she, scenes like that where it's like she fawns over Rand.
Yeah.
And she still has scenes, too, where she's like, oh, I hate that sheep herder, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, you'll see them as you go through, but definitely scenes I just
Speaking
read.
of sheep herders, golly, the women in this series are kind of... they're not physically abusive, but they're kind of like, I don't know.
Oh no. Nynaeve is 100% physically abusive.
Yes. But it's not really emotionally abusive. They're name callers. I don't really know. The men just kind of wag it off whatever. Yeah, I'm a wool-headed sheep herder, I guess.
Right. Well, I mean, so we've
But man, they just throw that out like crazy.
I mean, but the men do the same thing to the women, right? Like they call them names and they say they're overbearing and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is very true.
That's part of the theme of that Jordan was exploring, was the theme of the differences of genders. And like he was specifically exploring it from his kind of, his background is brought up in South Carolina, in the 40s, like born in the 40s, brought up through the 50s and 60s. So he's a very specific outlook on the world.
Yeah.
And so he's applying that outlook in this writing and exploring this dynamic. Obviously today with the modern world and how we understand like gender and sexuality, all that stuff, that doesn't hold up to the real world standards. But here's the beautiful thing about it is this is a fantasy world.
Oh yeah.
Right. And we can, like I mentioned earlier, we can always take solace in the fact that Jordan had the best of intentions. Yeah. He was not maliciously out here trying to, intentionally harm any group of people with his writings or anything. So it's just the way he saw the world from his very specific upbringing in the period of time he was brought up in. Yeah. So in that regard, we have to acknowledge that and talk about it, but that doesn't excuse him from, putting in many of these stereotypical things we see, or some of these like what you just said, quote unquote, abusive tendencies and characters. So it doesn't absolve the characters of these traits just because that's where they come from, right? Like, so if it did, then abuse cases would be pretty open and shut in a lot of scenarios.
Yep.
Anywho,
the one insult, and this is where I'll probably leave this. The one insult that gets me is they frequently talk about, where does Rand get off thinking he's some sort of high lord or high ruler? And it's like, well, the prophecies literally say he's going to end up uniting all the nations as like a ruler against the Dark One. So do you want him to just not do that? I mean, it's just kind of odd. And I guess they just still think of him as that sheep herder. But it's been 2 years of him stuck in this, trying to figure stuff out.
Oh, not 2 years, but no. It's been about a year.
About a year? Okay.
By the point where you're at. Yeah,
okay.
About.
I thought it was almost 2. But
no,
okay.
It's about a year. About a year.
The
series only spans 2 full years.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yep. And I mean, so that's the beginning of the series. Time moves fast because we lose 3 or 4 months in the Great Hunt. And then we lose another 3 months between the Great Hunt and the Dragon Reborn. Yeah. So that's half a year gone.
I guess I can see where they're coming from then. A year isn't enough time to be like, to change your opinion of someone completely. All right.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, to be honest, like stuff like that keeps people grounded too. Having people you grew up with around to remind you where you come from. And Rand does. He starts playing this like haughty, thing. Like, oh, I'm so great. I'm so powerful. Especially, I think you've maybe seen it in Fires of Heaven, especially once Asmodean starts teaching him a couple of tricks. Oh, yeah. Like, oh, no, I can control Sidene. I'm so great. So, I mean, Rand is not guilt-free in that regard. He does kind of affect some of that mentality. So,
all right.
Well, we're about out of time for this episode. Do you have any final thoughts or things you want to cover before we sign off for the week?
Not really. I mean, there's still so much to talk about, but it's hard to come about asking the questions naturally, It's something that needs to just pop up, and then I'll talk about it for like 30 minutes on a rant or something.
Well, I mean, so that's why when you get those questions, just write them down.
Just write them down.
Right? Yeah, just write them down. We can talk about them. That's fodder for discussion. So even if we don't get to all of them, we can always record more episodes and stuff like that. So
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm still super stoked you're enjoying the series and that it's paid off in multiple ways. Kitty, what are you doing to my foot? Okay, sorry. She attacked me down there. Y'all can't see her, but there's a cat down there. She loves lamp. She's all over this ring light over to the left. So, anywho,
Yes.
anywho, yeah. Just write stuff down. We'll talk
Yep.
about it, as it comes, and I'll try to be as spoiler free as I can.
Mhm.
And if I can't tell you something without spoiling, I'll just tell you to read.
Yeah.
Read on. But for the most part, I think we did pretty well today. We didn't really hit any,
Yeah.
spoilers past where you're at in the books. So
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Looking forward to doing the decompress of this book, The Fires of Heaven.
well, you got to finish it first.
Yeah.
You're only about a third.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta finish it up. But anyway, everyone, thanks for tuning in to listen to Matt and I just kind of ramble on about the Wheel of Time this week. I have been Vance of the Gleemen. That has been Matt, my friend. Go ahead and like the video on YouTube if you're there. Click the subscribe button, the little bell icon so you get notifications. If you're listening in the podcast, go ahead and rate us. Leave a review. That'll help us out a lot. Maybe help people find us. And if you are interested, tune in next time. That's all from us for this week. Have a good one, y'all. We're done. Okay, we got it. Nailed it.